everyone. You're listening to the Imperfect podcast with Kirsten Pfeiffer. I'm back here today with my friend Lauren Harris. Lauren actually is a co-producer on a film that I'm working on, and she's also an actress, a writer, a producer, and a director, among many other things. We actually met when we were kids in an acting class together in Philadelphia, so it's really come full circle, and I'm just glad to have her here today. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I wanted to start out by kind of your journey out to LA. I feel like it was such a serendipitous thing. We met when we were so young. We bonded over our razor pink flip phones, and it was the rest was history from there. And then cut 2 years later, I went to UCLA. She went to USC, so we're house divided. But
right on.
Did you always know that you wanted to come out here to LA? And kind of what was your journey moving out here to pursue your dreams?
Yeah, so Kirsten mentioned we both grew up in the Philadelphia area, and we met in Mike Lemon's acting class. Shout out Mike Lemon, phenomenal man.
Yes.
And I think Kirsten and we had similar upbringings. We sort of just bonded that way. I had known that I wanted to be an actor since I was in Stregonona when I was 5 years old. And you know the story of Stregonona. She's doing the pasta and the whole thing. And basically, I remembered everyone's lines in the play when we were all 5, 6, and I was backstage feeding everybody their lines in Stregonona. So the principal was like, you should really get her acting lessons. And then it just sort of carried on from there. USC was my dream school, so...
No comment.
No comment. But yeah, my dad went to USC, so I double majored in acting and Spanish there. And then from then on, I think as I got older, I grew up in a really political family. So activism became really important to me in my entertainment journey. So doing projects like the one that I'm working on with Kirsten and thinking about social justice issues within storytelling was always really important to me.
Yeah, that's actually was one of my questions I was going to ask, because I feel like it's been so cool watching your career from afar, but also being part of it to see your work evolve and to really align your work with things that you're passionate about. And so anyone that's listening right now, we're actually co-producing a film about human trafficking right now. And that's something that we both have become very passionate about raising awareness for. Can you tell me a little bit more about the other projects that you've worked on and that you're working on?
Yeah, so it's funny. On most of the projects that I'm working on, I've dragged Kirsten in to be in one way or the other. But so when I was graduating from USC, I studied at the British American Dramatic Academy. And one of the other students that was there, her name is Augusta, had approached me because she was interested in producing a project that was about modern dating culture and not necessarily sexual assault, but sort of the gray area between consent and just dating issues that happen in specifically females going through the common college experience. So she had approached me because she didn't have too much experience writing. She was more in the directing realm. Now I think she's doing all of it. But originally I was sort of focusing on the writing and she was focusing on the directing. And we produced that and it ended up winning 14 different awards in international film festivals. So we felt really lucky about the success on that. And then I think I just sort of got the bug on producing and wanted to continue doing it. Kirsten actually was one of the actors in It's a Girl Thing. That's the name of the film. And then after that, I got involved in a project called Defining Dodo, which is about Latinx LGBTQ matters, particularly growing up Latinx and LGBTQ in a machismo culture, because that poses a lot of different problems when coming out. And Kirsten was the AD on that, assistant director. So like I said, I've been dragging her along, and that's sort of just about to make its way through the festival circuit. We're now working on our human trafficking project, and that's been an incredible experience that I'm sure we'll talk more about.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of talk about it now. I was going to wait and warm people up before we jumped into the heavy stuff. But yeah, I mean, I feel like anyone that's listened to any of my previous episodes, sometimes I feel like a broken record when I'm talking about human trafficking. So I love bringing in people like you that also have a passion for it, that can kind of explain it in a different way. And what was it about human trafficking that stood out to you and made you want to go on this long journey with me of making this film?
So Kirsten approached me about doing something related to human trafficking. And honestly, I really didn't know that much about it when we first started approaching the topic, but I went home and I talked about it with my mom, and it was kind of serendipitous because she had been on the board of an organization called Dawn's Place. And Dawn's Place works as a safe house for victims and survivors of human trafficking. So I had said, like, you know what, let me do some more research on it, and then we can talk about, you know, figuring out this project and how we want it to look. So my mom introduced me to some women who work at Dawn's Place. One was the president of the board, Mary DeFusco, and one was a survivor named Anne-Marie Jones. And then subsequently, after meeting Anne-Marie, a partner who she authored a book with, A Shield Against the Monster, Carol Metzger. And it was amazing getting to work with them and then bringing them into the project with Kirsten. I think we've all kind of developed this little family at this point, but specifically meeting Anne-Marie, I think like it really just opened my eyes to the horrors of human trafficking that what was so interesting was that they were really happening in our own backyards. Like, I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, went to school on the main line, for those of you who are familiar, and in the Kensington area, which is really only 20 minutes from where I went to high school, is where human trafficking is really centralized in the Philadelphia area. And that was where Anne-Marie had spent 10 years of her life encompassed in this system. And she is truly one of the most inspiring person, her and both Carol. But they really just made us feel so comfortable. And in talking about these issues that were so traumatic and things that, like, for Anne-Marie, you know, caused so much trauma in her life and to her family, they opened us in with such open arms and really helped us in telling this story. And I think it was just one of the most incredible experiences of my life.
Yeah, I'm honestly so grateful for them. And like, shout out to Anne-Marie and Carol. Also, anyone, their book, this is like, I'm not just saying this because I'm biased. Their book is really, really great in ways that we can tangibly look out for this issue in our communities. And that's why it's called A Shield Against the Monster. It's to help be a shield against the monster of human trafficking. But yeah, they're just the bravest women I know. And for someone that has gone through human trafficking and survived it and still deals with like the PTSD and the trauma on a daily basis, and her reality for 10 years was being exploited on a daily basis, there's such a fine line when you're approaching working with survivors. Even if you have altruistic intentions, you never want to make them feel like you're just going to add to the exploitation for our own filmmaking or whatever the thing is. And so the fact that they really just were vulnerable and open with us and have supported us so much on the way, it's just like amazing. So I just wanted to take that moment to honor them if they're listening or if they're not.
I'd like to take this moment to mention that Kirsten still has my signed copy of the book, and I'd like that back. Thank you.
You know what? The second that you admit that UCLA is a superior school to USC, then we can chat. But no, all jokes aside, yeah, it's been a really cool journey. And yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is realizing it's happening in our backyards, and it can happen to like a person that you see on the street, that you've grown up with, that you know. Human traffickers exploit vulnerable individuals. So whatever that thing might be, you can go more into it with, you know, when we talk about our documentary, and when the documentary comes out, it will go deeper into that. But I think for now, the thing that I'm just passionate about is people realizing it is like happening in our backyards, and it is very much our issue that we should deal with. Yeah. And like, what have you learned about in general, just filmmaking and aligning filmmaking with social justice issues? Have you learned anything from that process that you feel like can help people be inspired in whatever their thing is, whatever their area of influence or gifting is? Like, how can we all kind of use those gifts to make an impact?
I think it's the most fulfilling way to tell a story. I think when you go into creating something, having a mission behind it and a passion behind it makes such the difference in telling a story. Like, and I think that there's so many different ways that stories can help, even if they're, you know, truly a comedy. I think you can still find ways in putting subliminal messages in there and just having a purpose for telling that story. I think that has definitely been my inspiration in filmmaking. I would say that it's a lot of effort, filmmaking, and I think that the pandemic has only added to the difficulties of doing that. There's a lot more that you have to think about now when making a film, but it also makes it almost more that fulfilling because you're still willing to traverse all of these obstacles into telling the story that you're so passionate about telling. I think the incredible thing about I don't know if you read the book White Fragility, but one of the things they talk about is how important filmmaking and the entertainment industry are in changing our societal methods and changing our societal views. And I think that's just because you have such an audience and such a broader reach when you're telling a story in this type of platform.
Yeah.
So I think telling stories about human trafficking and revealing the horrors of it for our project, it just makes you feel like you're making such a difference in it. And, you know, there's so many ways and so many small ways that you can make a difference in our world besides storytelling.
Yeah.
But having this broad reach, I think just is something that's made me feel incredibly grateful.
Absolutely. And you brought up a good point about what they said in White Fragility about how the media has such an impact on our culture and society and the way we see things. It's interesting because a lot of these issues that we're now tackling are a result of the culture that has been perpetuated by Hollywood and the ideals in Hollywood. I mean, there's a documentary called Liberated. It's on Netflix, and it's all about the hookup culture in America and how that becomes a breeding ground for all of this sexual assault that happens, which is then also intertwined with human trafficking. Like, all of these things are very interconnected, much more so than we sometimes realize. And so if just a rule of thumb, like anything that can be used for bad can also then be used for good. So that's what's been really exciting for me as we're on this journey, is seeing that and like seeing the impact that you can have. And like you said, I mean, anyone that has made a film knows anything that can go wrong will go wrong, especially when you're doing it in the middle of a pandemic. But I think having that like why and something bigger than yourself to like keep going has really made such a difference. I mean, even prior to recording this, we were doing some voiceover for the documentary and like the equipment like setup was not right. Lauren literally flew across the country for us to film this. I had to fly across the country in the summer in the middle of a pandemic. She made me wear a face shield with like plastic in between the front and the back, like all of those things. But we were able to like push through it. Honestly, if it wasn't something like human trafficking that I really cared about, I don't know if I would have gone through all of that. Sorry, Lauren. But yeah, I think it's really cool. And yeah, what's your favorite part about filmmaking? I mean, all the social justice stuff aside, like why were you drawn to that?
I think that the reason that I was originally drawn to it was being able to step into somebody else's shoes and have empathy for that person's story was always something that just like almost made me glow, you know, like being able to really understand somebody else. And I mean, the stories that we get to dive into as actors, like some of them are complex, some of them are not pretty complex, but we get to go into so many different people's stories. And I think I'm definitely an empath, and being able to just understand somebody else in a broader sense than myself has always really inspired me. Yeah,
I completely agree. And I think if the world needs anything right now, it's empathy. And that is really how we can start to move towards any kind of progress. I mean, obviously 2020 revealed a lot of kind of what we knew was already happening, but brought it to the surface. And that's the exciting thing, I think, is being at that place where like so much brokenness has been revealed that now like we're the generation where we can actually do something about it. And not to sound cliche and trite, but like be the change that you want to see. So it's been inspiring for me being able to like partner with people like you and go down that path. And I think it makes, I mean, we kind of already said this, but it makes pursuing a career in Hollywood is very, very difficult. And I think it makes it, again, like having that why, or in anything you're doing, whether you're pursuing a career in Hollywood or not, like when you're pursuing these big dreams, having something bigger to attach it to is really key. And yeah, what has your journey been like pursuing a career in Hollywood as an actress? Where do we start?
Where do we start? No, I definitely feel incredibly grateful to be working with people like you. And I think that working on projects like this is what makes all of the uphill battles worth it, you know, because I like to say that working in Hollywood is just like relationships. It has its ebbs and flows. And yeah, I would say largely it's been fulfilling, but I think that I've also been very privileged and very lucky to have gotten a great education at USC, fight on, in acting.
Agree to disagree.
And I think that really helped it. And I also think that you definitely, living in LA, you make your circle of people, and the people you surround yourself with really help to make the whole experience a little bit easier to deal with, you know, and that's why I'm grateful to be with people like you who you can commiserate with. And, but yeah, I would say that it's definitely been a journey. You definitely play roles that do not feel fulfilling to you, like hot girl next door or party girl drinking alcohol in the corner, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think those are the roles that you're like, this is why I wanted to be an actor. Exactly. But they're all part of the journey, and they allow us to get to do things like this, and that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. What has been your toughest challenge pursuing a career in Hollywood?
Oh my goodness. My toughest challenge pursuing a career in Hollywood. I mean, honestly, the pandemic, because I do think that it was such a setback, and I think all of Hollywood in the beginning of March had no idea what was going to happen.
Remember when we were like, oh, it's only going to be 2 weeks? Like,
I flew to Philadelphia thinking that I was going to be there for 2 weeks, and here we are. Yeah. And I think that the pandemic just made us feel like, how are we ever going to make things happen? But because it was such a challenge, it made it all like, do you really want to stick with this? Is this really what you care about?
Yeah.
And if you do, and if you still feel that way, then you still find a way to make it happen. Yeah. I mean, like Kirsten said, she flew to Philadelphia, and I put up a barrier in the car because I was so afraid of her germs. We filmed the entire thing outside, and it all worked out, and it was okay. But, you know, you have to make that decision. Like, is this career worth it for you? Because it isn't for everyone, you know? But
I always say, and this wasn't original for me, I think my acting coach said this, but like, if you can imagine doing anything else, do that, because it's like not all the glitz and the glamour that you think it is. I mean, that's part of the job, but very, very, very small part. What people don't see is like the working 3 jobs so you can pay your rent. Right. They don't see the survival jobs, as we call them. They don't see you like crying every single time you hear no. Like, I was talking about this with a friend the other day who's an actor. Like, we're so afraid of the word no now. Yeah. And that, like, we have to like consciously kind of unpack that, because that's not healthy either. Yeah. But I think like learning to deal with that rejection, there's just a lot that happens that's not pleasant as an actor. So I think you have to really make sure that you're in it for like the art and the passion, and that you're willing to like go through those challenges together. And I think that COVID, like, I know a lot of people that moved away from LA. They're like, I actually don't want this anymore. And the exciting thing is, on the other end of this, any actors listening, like, all the production companies need content. They've been gearing up. There's going to be, I think, an explosion of content.
100%, for sure.
So it's like, are you ready for it? Have you been like working that muscle and kind of, but also giving yourself time to relax. Absolutely. Like, I honestly, it is such like a rat race, especially in LA. And I think having that time to sit and reflect. And I asked myself that question, is this actually what I want? Like, I've been going nonstop. For me, my story, like, I knew I wanted to move to LA when I was 13. I was like, my parents literally said, you have to wait till you're 18. So out of spite, I was like, fine, I'm going to UCLA, because I didn't even know what USC was. I've never heard of that school. I did apply, but I didn't. I decided on a better choice. And anyhow, I ended up going there, and then it was like, point of me saying, like, I feel like I was like going since I was 13. Like, the goal is like to get into UCLA, and then to graduate UCLA, and then to book a series. Like, and I never stopped. And I feel like taking this year to sit and reflect and think about that was like so healthy, because then it also, like, for me, it like reinvigorated that passion. Like, yes, I am choosing this, and yes, I'm going to keep going. So yeah, I'm excited. I feel like good things are coming.
Let's hope so. I'm definitely on that train, and I'm ready for them to happen. So. Yeah,
absolutely. So we're getting into like the closing questions here. I'm going to ask you a personal question.
Oh, goodness.
So the name of this podcast is Imperfect. Yes. And the reason why it is called that is because I believe that when we embrace our imperfections and our vulnerabilities, and we own our story, it actually just creates a space for everyone to be vulnerable and to own their stories. And I feel like that's where our strength comes in, and we can then be filled up ourselves, and then like spill over into these issues that need our help, like human trafficking and etc. Yeah. So what is the imperfection that you are most proud of besides being a Trojan?
Wow, you set yourself up for that. Okay, don't ruin my vibe over here. I think the imperfection that I'm most proud of, and that I will say also gets me into trouble, is my persistence in a way that like I won't give up on things that maybe I should be giving up on, that like are no longer serving me, in a way that I think I just have a big trouble with letting go of things. And even if it's no longer working out, or I just want to see it to its fruition. And of course, sometimes that can be an amazing thing. Like with our career, you need to be persistent, but I think it also definitely gets me into trouble in my personal life, and just a fear of letting go for sure.
There it is. Like, I feel like every imperfection is actually the back end of a gift.
Right.
Like, that is actually such a gift, and that makes you an amazing producer. Like, working with you has been a dream. Because it's like, no, we're going to get this done. Like, I don't care if there's a pandemic. I don't care. Like, we're going to get it done. Yeah. So that's great. But I think, like, with that, like, our strongest gifts can also, like, bring a lot of stress and anxiety, and there's a back end to it. So I think the first step is, like, being aware and then managing that. And I feel like we both share that quality. So, like, sometimes we can bring out the worst in each other, but, like, learning when to cut it off. So thanks for sharing.
But I think that it also makes us good co-producers, you know, because, like, there's going to be a dedication to the project, and sometimes you definitely come along people who are willing to let go of something, and it's something that, like, we're both so passionate about that you know that nobody is going to give up on it, and we have that faith and trust in each other. Right.
And I think because, I mean, there's been so many times where you, I think, identify that in me, and then you tell me, like, Kirsten, it's okay. Like, you're like, as your producer, this is an actual quote from Lauren the night before a shoot, when it was like, do we need to order more things on Amazon? Like, do we have enough flower pins for the tutus on the ballerinas? And she's like, Kirsten, as your co-producer, I appreciate your attention to detail. As your friend, you need to go to sleep. But it's like learning like that, I feel like it is. And that's why so many filmmakers end up like working together again and again. Because once you find that like bond, synergy and that bond, it's like, okay, yeah, like my mental health is important. Yeah. I'm gonna go to sleep. The flowers on the tutus did look great, I will say.
They really did. They really did look beautiful. Yeah.
Shout out to Amazon. Yes. This was before I had a thief in my building stealing all of my Amazon packages, so I'm not going to get into that, but glad it all worked out.
You add like a wanted announcement on your
seriously.
podcast.
If you have stolen my boxes, please return them. I love that though. And okay, so what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received and the worst piece of advice?
Oh my gosh. The best piece of advice that I have ever received. Honestly, I think the best piece of advice I've received is don't be afraid to be yourself. And again, just to be aware that life has its ebbs and flows, because I think that it's so easy to get stuck in the difficult parts of pursuing a career in the industry and in your personal life. And especially like in this career, like, oh, I haven't done enough at this age, or like, there's so much more that I want to be doing. Am I ever going to get the opportunity to do that? But to be willing to sit in the difficult parts and to keep going. I think that's really important. And I also think that being able to be true to yourself and not getting caught up in, you know, the social media world and being somebody that you don't feel is true to yourself, because I think that keeping a sense of self in trying to pursue this career is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like literally as an actor, like the casting directors say all the time, they want to see real people. And I think so many actors walk in trying to be what they think the casting directors want to see. And that's actually the opposite of what they want to see. They just want to see a real authentic person. And most times, like, that's actually not going to be what the casting directors are looking for. But then they're going to be like, you know what, that person was real and they're grounded and they're a good actor. So like, I'm going to remember them for this other role.
Exactly.
And if you were trying to be someone else, then they wouldn't remember you for the right role. It has been such a good lesson in like not comparing and authenticity and just staying true to who you are, and like also knowing boundaries. I think it's a career where it's so hard to find your power, and it's so hard to get like a first opportunity that I think sometimes as actors you feel like you have to say yes to things.
Absolutely.
Even if it lies outside of your beliefs and your boundaries. But I've learned that setting those boundaries early on really gains respect from the industry and from people. Absolutely. And then they will, like it in a way gives you more power, if that makes sense. So I think no matter what you're doing, it's like knowing what is your non-negotiable and like sticking to that no matter what, and trusting your gut, because
Absolutely.
I feel like there's been a few times where I've said no to roles that I just didn't feel comfortable doing. And I felt like, oh, am I being selfish? Am I not like being grateful for these opportunities? Am I going to get blacklisted? I feel like every new actor has like a fear of being blacklisted.
100%.
And it actually did two things. One, it was a newer manager and they really respected it, and then they knew what I was willing and not willing to do. And then two, 3 days later, I got the biggest audition of my life. And so it's like, I always think that there's something better on the other side of you, like following your gut and intuition. And I think a lot of actors, myself included, have this like scarcity mindset sometimes that makes you act. Anytime you're doing anything out of a scarcity mindset, it makes you make not good decisions. Yeah. So I think learning that, and then when you have an abundance mindset, then you cannot compare yourself to other people, and you cannot, I feel like that's why we both have a healthy friendship, and I feel like I have a healthy friendship with a lot of my other friends that are actors. It's like, you would think that maybe there would be competition or jealousy that comes in. And I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes I have to check myself, like when it's hard not to be like, oh, I wish I had that opportunity. For sure. Yeah. But at the end of the day, just like remembering that there's like abundance, there's like always another role, and that like I'm not going to play a role the same way that Lauren is. Like there really only is one role for, you know, like one person that can do it the best. So yeah, I think it's a cool, like there's a lot of lessons that Hollywood has taught me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like sometimes it is hard to like shake that little birdie off that's like, you could be doing that, or why aren't you doing that, or don't you wish you were doing that? Yeah. But it is so important to realize, like, even when you just said you had the biggest audition after, like, even if that's not the one that you get, you're now in front of that casting director who can say like, maybe you're not right for this one, but I think that you'd be great for another one. Right. And just like expanding your horizons and expanding your network, I think is always so helpful. Absolutely. Yeah. I think saying yes to things too, like as long as it feels right for you in your gut, like you never know when that's going to lead to the next thing. Like even if it's, I know you also have done this, like done so much unpaid work in Hollywood. And it's like, but it's also led to a lot of like great connections and opportunities. So it's all just part of the journey. Yeah. And even the unpaid work, I mean, we're doing this because we love it, right? Yeah. So like even the unpaid work can be just as fulfilling as the paid work. Right, right. I forget what actor it was that said this once, but that he sees auditions as like a chance to be able to act like for free. Yeah. Cause like, that's another thing about acting. It's like, you kind of like have to pay for acting class. Like you're not like a musician where you can like pick up a guitar and like play. Or you can just do like Shakespeare monologues all day, but that gets weird after a while. So I think like having like, no, these casting directors like paid for this room for me to come here and show them my art. So when you like have that mindset, I think it makes it a lot more fun. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Did you say what the worst piece of advice? I didn't. I was afraid that you were going to come back to this one. I'm going to say that the worst piece of advice that I have been given is probably to quit, honestly. Like people who tell you like if you're going to go to school to study acting, then maybe you should become a professor. Or you know, people who say that like, oh, you like to do acting, then maybe you should become a psychologist. Or people who are just not going to see your passion and then, you know, not believe in you to go the distance with it. Yeah. I think that, again, like we said, if this is something you're passionate about, then stick with it, right? Yeah. And I think that it is immediately obvious when you're doing these things, and again, like you're willing to pursue them within a pandemic, whether it's something that you care about enough. Right. So I think that, you know, one of the good piece of advice that I've been given is from Hannah Dickinson, actually, who's a comedian on Comedy Central. She said that she thinks that the people who give up on it often give up too early, and that she sees the people who are successful right now are not always the most talented, but they're people who are willing to stick with it. So that is great advice. Yeah. And I think anyone that discourages you from anything, maybe it's like they think it's from a place of like love and whatnot, but I feel like the people that have been naysayers to me in like my career and like being like, oh, what are you going to do if it doesn't work out? And like, there's something about like going for your dreams in a way, like that's rare. Not everyone does that. Right. And so when other people that maybe have convinced themselves that like a safe career in life is like what they actually want, but they haven't like gone after their dreams, they see you going for it. And something about that threatens them because they've told themselves this story that like, that's not going to work. So when they see you doing it and it's somewhat working, they're like, they need to convince you to abort mission so that they can know that they're right, you know? And it's all subconscious, I think. And I don't think that's the case with everyone, but like my parents are so supportive, but like my dad for sure has times been like, well, what's your plan B? Because he's like, I need to make sure that you're going to like have retirement savings, etc., all those fun life things. But yeah, just keep going and Yeah, my plan B, it begins with a B, and it's called Brian. My boyfriend.
Shout out to Brian. He's also the best PA we've ever had.
Literally.
He's actually very multifaceted. He also stood in as a trafficker.
100%. Yeah, against somebody who you gotta hate because he got into SAG through doing my project. So
no way.
Yeah, the amount of actors who spend so much time trying to get into SAG, and my boyfriend, who is literally a salesman, just rolled up and had the eligibility to do it through doing my project.
Did he join?
Absolutely not, no.
I mean, I just feel like it would be a nice thing for him to be like, yeah, I'm in SAG, get the screeners.
Only one of us has to pay those dues.
Have you gotten your screeners yet?
No.
We've talked about this with Mark. We haven't gotten our screeners yet.
Oh my God, I wonder if they're at my apartment. Interesting question.
Maybe you have a thief. I'm like, did the thief steal my screeners in my building?
Oh my
but like, I think they're delayed. They're, what?
I think they're delayed.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, well,
One person that got them.
okay. I think they're too busy dealing with angry letters from Donald Trump.
I didn't want to say it. I didn't know if we could talk about that on this podcast.
I mean, it's just a fact. It's not political at all. It's just a fact. There's evidence. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, now, if you could leave listeners with one piece of inspiration, what would it be? It could be to actors. It could be to activists. It could be anyone.
Yeah. I think find your mission. Like, what is it that you care the most about? What is it the most that you want to be doing? Who do you want to be surrounding yourself with in order to achieve that mission? And once you know what your mission is, then don't give up on it. Don't let anybody stand in your way, and make it happen for yourself.
That is a great note to end on. And I'm so glad to be making things happen with you. Yeah, and thank you everyone for joining in today. Like I said, we're working on this documentary. We're super excited about it. So we're going to be posting a lot more information about that soon. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, Lauren, how can people connect with you and follow you?
You can follow me on Instagram at Lauren Elizabeth Harris, and that's one H between the Elizabeth and Harris. They share it.
Very specific. As someone that everyone misspells my name, I feel it. So
the other Lauren Elizabeth Harris has the double H, so shout out to her.
We love her. Do we, though? Thanks again for joining in, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.